In 1966, a new wave of violence rolled onto the land of China, and an uncontrollable red terror spread like a monster dragon gone mad, or a wild horse broken from the rain, shaking the mountains and freezing the rivers. Writer Qin Mu described the Cultural Revolution in the following bleak terms. It was truly an unprecedented calamity. The CCP imprisoned millions due to their association with a targeted family member, ended the lives of millions more, shattered families, turned children into hoodlums and villains. Burned books, tore down ancient buildings, and destroyed ancient intellectuals' grave sites, committing all kinds of crimes in the name of revolution. Conservative estimates place the number of unnatural deaths during the Cultural Revolution at 7.73 million. People often mistakenly think that the violence and slaughter during the Cultural Revolution happened mostly during the rebel movements, and that it was the Red Guards and rebels who committed the killing. However, thousands of officially published Chinese county annuals indicate that the peak of unnatural deaths during the Cultural Revolution was not in 1966, when the Red Guards controlled most of the government organizations, or in 1967, when the rebels fought among different groups with weapons, but rather in 1968, when various levels of revolutionary committees were established, and Mao regained control over the entire country. The violence during the Cultural Revolution did not originate from the extreme behavior of the Red Guards and rebels, but from the policy of the CCP and the regional governments. In August 1966, the Red Guards expelled Beijing residents who had been classified in past movements as landlords, rich farmers, reactionaries, bad elements, and rightists, and forced them to the countryside. The available official statistics show that almost 34,000 homes were searched, and over 85,000 Beijing residents were expelled from the city and sent back to where their parents had originally come from. Red Guards all over the country followed suit, expelling over 400,000 urban residents to the countryside. Even high-ranking officials, if their parents were landlords, faced exile to the country. In fact, the CCP planned the expulsion campaign even before the Cultural Revolution began. Former Beijing Mayor Peng Jun declared that the residents of Beijing, ideologically, should be as pure as glass or crystals, meaning that all residents with a bad class background would be expelled from the city. In May of 1966, Mao commanded his subordinates to protect the capital. A capital working team was set up, led by Ye Jianying, Yang Chongwu, and Xie Fuzhi. One of the tasks of this team was to use the police to expel Beijing residents of bad class background. This history helps make clear why the government and police departments did not intervene, but rather supported the Red Guards in searching homes and expelling more than 2% of Beijing residents. The Minister of Public Security, Xie Fuzhi, required the police to not intervene in the Red Guards' actions, but rather to provide advice and information to them. The Red Guards were simply utilized by the party to carry out a planned action. And then, at the end of 1966, the Red Guards were abandoned by the CCP. Many were labeled counter-revolutionaries and imprisoned, and others were sent to the countryside along with other urban youth to reform their thoughts through hard labor. The Westtown Red Guard organization, which led the expulsion of city residents, was established under the so-called caring guidance of the CCP leaders. The order to incriminate the Red Guards was also issued after being revised by the Secretary General of the State Council. Following the removal of the Beijing residents of bad class background, the rural areas started another round of persecution of bad class elements. On August 26, 1966, a speech by Xue Fuzhi was passed down to the Daxing police force at their work meeting. Xue ordered the police to assist the Red Guards in searching the homes of the 5 black classes. The 5 black classes are landlords, rich peasants, reactionaries, so-called bad elements, and rightists. The police provided information and advice and helped the Red Guards in their raids. The infamous Daxing massacre occurred as a direct result of instructions from the police department. The organizers were the party secretary and the director of the police department, and the killers were mostly militiamen. They did not even spare the children. During the Cultural Revolution, many were admitted into the CCP for their so-called good behavior during such slaughters. Statistics from Guangxi province, for example, show the following. More than 9,000 were admitted to the party shortly after they had killed someone. More than 20,000 committed murder after being admitted to the party, and more than 19,000 other party members were involved in killing in one way or another. These figures, from one province alone, show that nearly 50,000 CCP members engaged in killing. During the Cultural Revolution, class theory was also to be applied to beatings. The theory held that the bad deserved it if they were beaten by the good. It was honorable also for a bad person to beat another bad person. It was a misunderstanding if a good person beat another good person. This and more of Mao's theories were spread widely in the rebel movements. Violence and slaughter were widespread, following the logic that the class enemies deserved any violence against them. From August 13th to October 7th, 1967, militiamen in Dao County of Hunan Province slaughtered members of the Shanjiang Wind and Thunder organization and those of the 5 black classes. The slaughter lasted 66 days and extended to 468 brigades in 36 people's communes across 10 districts, killing more than 4,500 people in over 2,700 households. In the entire prefecture, which consists of 10 counties, a total of 9,093 people were killed, of which 38% were of the 5 black classes and 44% were their children. The oldest person killed was 78 years old, and the youngest was only 10 days old. This is only one case of violence that occurred in just one small area during the Cultural Revolution. In Inner Mongolia, after the establishment of the Revolutionary Committee in early 1968, the cleansing of class rank and purge of the People's Revolutionary Party resulted in the deaths of more than 350,000 people. In 1968, tens of thousands of people in Guangxi province participated in the mass slaughter of a public faction known as the 422 organization, killing more than 110,000. Those who were directly involved in ordering and carrying out the killing were mostly the military, police, armed militia, and key members of the party and the Communist Youth League. The purpose of the Cultural Revolution was to establish communism as the one and only religion dominating the entire country, controlling not just the state, but also every individual's mind. The Cultural Revolution pushed the CCP and Mao Zedong's cult of personality to a climax. Mao's theory was used to dictate everything, and one person's vision had to be embedded in tens of millions of people's minds. The Cultural Revolution, in a way unprecedented and never again to be matched, did not specify what could not be done. Instead, the party emphasized what could be done and how to do it. Anything outside this boundary could not be done or even considered. During the Cultural Revolution, everyone in the country carried out a religious-like ritual. They ask the party for instructions in the morning and report to the party in the evening. They salute Chairman Mao several times a day, wishing him boundless longevity. They repeat morning and evening political prayers every day. Nearly every person who can read has had the experience of having to write self-criticism and thought reports. Mao's quotations, such as the following, were frequently recited. "Fight ferociously against every passing thought of selfishness. Execute the party's command, whether or not you understand it. Even if you do not understand, carry it out anyway, and your understanding should deepen in the process of execution." Only one God was allowed to be worshipped, and that God was Mao. Only one kind of scriptures were allowed to be studied, Mao's teachings. Soon, the God-making process progressed to such a degree that the people could not even buy food in canteens if they did not first recite a quotation or offer a greeting to Mao. When shopping, riding the bus, or even making a phone call, one had to recite one of Mao's quotations, even if it was totally irrelevant. In these rituals of worship, people were either fanatical or cynical, and in either case, they had already come under the control of the communist evil specter. Producing lies, tolerating lies, and relying on lies became a part of daily life for Chinese people. The Cultural Revolution was a period full of bloodshed, killing, grievance, loss of conscience, and the confusion of right and wrong. After the Cultural Revolution, the CCP leadership changed its banners frequently, while the government changed hands 6 times within 20 years. Private ownership has now returned to China. Disparities in the standards of living between the cities and the rural areas have widened. The area of China's landscape lying waste to desert has quickly expanded. River water has been drying up, and drug use and prostitution have increased. All of the crimes the CCP swore to fight are now permitted again. The CCP's political control continues to rely on the Communist Party philosophy of struggle and violence. The CCP's ruthless heart, devious nature, evil actions, and ability to bring ruin to the country has only increased. Under the CCP rule, the legal system, news reporting, education, and policy implementation have all become tools for the CCP to exercise violence and to deceive the people. Under the influence of Confucianism, Chinese people have traditionally valued benevolence and righteousness, using propriety to persuade people instead of resorting to punishment and regulation, in which case lawsuits will disappear. To explain this, instead of building a perfect legal system, if we educate people with moral principles, people would be peaceful and nobody would need to engage in lawsuits. Of course, when people cannot reach high enough moral standards, laws must be made to suppress wrongful behavior and to maintain social order. The ancient Chinese saw laws as the lowest standards of moral maintenance, since criminal laws deal with people of no virtue rather than good people of moral adherence. Now that we have laws, all people should abide by them without deviation, regardless of whether they are officials or regular citizens. On the other hand, if, as the Chinese saying goes, officials can set a fire while commoners are not even allowed to light a candle, or in other words, if the officials themselves take the lead in breaking the law, then how can they continue to use the name of law to rule over the people? Under CCP control, the Chinese legal system has become its tool. Those in power make the law, but break it themselves. In implementing the law, the CCP officials only cleanse those holding opinions that differ from their own. They indulge themselves, playing with the law, instead of using it to discipline themselves. The law has become a stick used by the CCP to punish the people and the dissidents. This is in violation of heaven and humanity. Pretending to be righteous, the CCP legal regulations are, in fact, used to control the good people while protecting corrupt officials. Lies and slander published in the newspapers and broadcast on television have greatly assisted the execution of the CCP's policies in all past political movements. The media instantly execute the party's commands. When the party wanted to start the anti-rightist movement, for example, media all over China reported the so-called crimes of the rightists. When the party wanted to set up the People's Communes, every newspaper in the nation immediately started to praise the superiority of People's Communes. When the party said the 1989 student protest was a riot, media all over China insisted that suppressing the protest with guns was the correct path. Within the first month of the persecution of Falun Gong, television and radio stations slandered Falun Gong repeatedly in their primetime broadcasting in order to brainwash the people. Since then, all media have repeatedly fabricated and spread lies about Falun Gong. This includes the effort to incite nationwide hatred against Falun Gong by reporting false news, blaming Falun Gong practitioners with murder and suicide. In the past 5 years, no mainland Chinese newspaper or TV station has reported the true situation about Falun Gong. Chinese people have become used to the false news reports. A senior reporter from Xinhua News Agency once said, "How could you trust a Xinhua report?" People have even described Chinese news agencies as the party's dog. A Chinese folk song about the media goes, "It is a dog raised by the party, guarding the party's gate. It bites anyone the party wants it to bite, and bites however many times the party wants it to." The original purpose of education was to develop intellectuals so that they would have both knowledge and good judgment. Knowledge refers to the understanding of information and data from historical and current events. Judgment refers to the process of analyzing, investigating, critiquing, and reproducing such knowledge, which is in fact a process of spiritual development. Those who have knowledge without proper judgment might be called bookworms, not true intellectuals with a social conscience. This is why in Chinese history it is the intellectuals with righteous judgment, not those having merely knowledge, who have been highly respected. Under CCP control, however, China is filled with intellectuals who have knowledge, but not judgment, as well as those who dare not exercise judgment. Education in China's schools focuses on teaching students not to do things that the party does not want them to do. Under CCP rule, all schools have to teach politics and CCP history using standardized textbooks. The teachers do not believe the content of the textbooks, yet they are forced by the party to teach it against their wills. The students do not believe the textbooks or their teachers, yet they have to remember everything in the textbooks in order to pass the exams. Recently, questions about Falun Gong were included in term and entrance exams for colleges and high schools. Students who do not know the party's standard answers do not get scores high enough to enter good schools. If a student dares to speak the truth, he will be expelled from school immediately and lose any chance of formal education. In the public education system, due to the influence of the newspapers and government policies, many sayings or phrases have been spread as the truth and have become well known to all Chinese. One example is the following of Mao's quotations: "We should support whatever the enemy opposes and oppose whatever the enemy supports." The negative effect is widespread. It has poisoned people's hearts, supplanting benevolence and destroying the moral principle of living in peace and harmony. In 2004, the China Information Center analyzed a study done by Sinanet, a major Chinese-language internet portal, and the results showed that nearly 85% of Chinese youths agreed that one is allowed to abuse women, children, and prisoners during a war. This is shocking, but it reflects the Chinese people's mindset, especially that of the younger generation, who lack a basic understanding of the traditional concept of benevolent rule and the notion of universal humanity. On September 11, 2004, a man went on a rampage and fanatically stabbed 28 children with a knife in Suzhou City. On the 20th of the same month, a man in Shandong province injured 25 elementary school students with a knife. These killings have been molded from the same violence that has formed the CCP. The CCP leaders have often used threats and coercion to ensure the implementation of their policies. One of the means they used was the political slogan. For a long time, the CCP used the number of slogans posted as a criterion to assess a cadre's political achievements. During the Cultural Revolution, Beijing became a sea of red posters overnight, with the slogan, "Down with the ruling capitalists in the party," everywhere. In the countryside, by accident, the rural cadres shortened the signs to read, "Down with the ruling party." To promote its forest law, the State Bureau of Forestry and all its stations and forest protection offices strictly ordered a standard number of slogans to be put out. Not reaching the quota would be treated as not accomplishing the task. In the administration of birth control, there have been even scarier slogans such as, "If one person violates the law, the whole village will be sterilized." Another, "Rather another tomb than another baby," or, "If she didn't have an abortion as she should, her house will be torn down. If she didn't have an abortion as she should, her cows and rice fields will be confiscated." There were more slogans that violate human rights and the Constitution, such as, "You will sleep in prison tomorrow if you don't pay your taxes today." A slogan is essentially a means to spread messages, but in a very direct and repetitive manner. Hence, the Chinese government uses slogans to promote its political intent, will, and propositions. Political slogans can also be viewed as the government speaking directly to the people. However, in the CCP's policy-promoting slogans, it is not hard for one to smell the air of violence and cruelty. The most effective weapon the CCP uses to maintain its tyrannical rule is its network of control. In a well-organized fashion, the CCP imposes a mentality of obedience on every one of its citizens. Whether the party contradicts itself or constantly changes policies doesn't matter, so long as it can use organizational means to deprive people of their naturally endowed human rights. The government's tentacles are omnipresent, whether it is in rural or urban areas. The so-called street or township committees govern the citizens. Until recently, getting married or divorced, even having a child, all needed the approval of these committees. The party's ideology, way of thinking, organizational methods, social structure, propaganda mechanisms, and administrative systems serve only the CCP's dictatorial purposes. The party, through the mechanisms of government, strives to control every individual's thoughts and actions. The brutality with which the CCP controls its people is not limited to the physical torture it inflicts. The party also forces people to lose their ability to think independently and makes them into fearful, self-protective cowards daring not to speak up. The goal of the CCP's rule is to brainwash each of its citizens so that they think, act, and talk like the CCP and do what it promotes. There is a saying that party policy is like the moon. It changes every 15 days. No matter how the party changes its policies, everyone in the nation needs to follow them closely. When you are used as a means of attacking others, you need to thank the party for appreciating your strength. When you are attacked, you have to thank the party for teaching you a lesson. When you are wrongfully discriminated against, and the party later needs to give you redress, you have to thank the party for being generous, open-minded, and able to correct its mistakes. The party runs its tyranny through continuous cycles of suppression, followed by redress. After 55 years of tyranny, the CCP has imprisoned the nation's mind and constrained it within the range allowed by the CCP. For someone to think outside this boundary is considered a crime. After repeated struggles, stupidity is praised as wisdom. Being a coward is the way to survive. In a modern society with the Internet as the mainstream of information exchange, the CCP even asks its people to exercise self-discipline and not read news from outside or log on to websites with keywords like human rights and democracy. Speaking of the CCP tyranny, people are reminded of the endless movements, such as the land reform, suppression of counter-revolutionaries, the 3 anti- and 5 anti-campaigns, the anti-rightist and anti-right-leaning campaigns, the 4 cleanups, the Cultural Revolution, and so on. In reality, as China is possessed by the communist evil specter, tyranny and persecution are not limited to political movements, but have permeated every day of every period since the CCP came to power. It is only that during political movements, the persecution is more conspicuous. During the 55 years of the CCP rule, persecution has become part of the system, even using terror as a means of control now and again. This tyranny, often exercised under such abstract and lofty ideals as communism and national development, easily misleads people into making wrong conclusions. In comparison with the outrageous emperors of the past, whose extreme corruption and self-indulgence led commoners to suffer, the Communist Party can be defended, no matter how egregious its crimes are, as they come from ideals rather than material greed. Little do people realize that tyranny led by ideals is the cruelest tyranny of all. Using its philosophy of struggle to eliminate dissidents and enslave human hearts in order to establish its status as the one and only religion under heaven. The CCP has made itself into the world's cruelest despot. Understanding this, we can thoroughly recognize the CCP tyranny. In Chinese history, every benevolent leader viewed loving, nourishing, and educating the people as the duties of government. Human nature aspires to kindness, and the government's role is to bring about this innate human capacity. Mencius, who followed Confucius, said, "This is the way of the people. Those with constant means of support will have constant hearts, while those without constant means will not have constant hearts." Education without prosperity has been ineffective. The tyrannical leaders who have had no love for the people, but who have killed the innocent, have been despised by the Chinese people. In the 5,000 years of Chinese history, there have been many benevolent leaders, such as Emperor Yao and Emperor Shun in ancient times, Emperor Wen and Emperor Wu of the Zhou dynasty, Emperor Wen and Emperor Jing in the Han dynasty, Emperor Tang Taizong in the Tang dynasty, Emperor Kangxi and Emperor Qianlong in the Qing dynasty. The prosperity enjoyed in these dynasties was all a result of the leaders practicing the heavenly Tao, following the doctrine of the mean, and striving for peace and stability. The characteristics of a kind leader are to make use of virtuous and capable people, to be open to different opinions, to promote justice and peace, and to give the people what they need. This way, citizens will obey the laws, maintain a sense of decorum, live happily, and work efficiently. Looking at world affairs, we often ask, who determines whether a state will prosper or disappear, even though we know that the rise and fall of a nation has its reasons. With the Chinese culture's profound tradition and Chinese people's diligence and wisdom, we will surely see peace and prosperity returning to the Chinese land when China frees itself from the CCP's tyrannical control.